Hello and welcome to Teach Me School Stuff. In this video I'm going to show you how to use Adobe Flash animation, otherwise contemporary known as Adobe Animate, but this is Adobe CS4, so a bit of an older version of Flash, but much of it still works the same today. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to create a sort of Terry Gilliam inspired cartoon using cutout images from Photoshop, which then you bring into Flash and animate the various body parts. You can add eyes over top and stuff like that. So let's just take a quick look at some of the stuff I've thrown together here so far.
America's President #1, Founding Father Washington, John Adams, second President, the very first.
We're going to have strong, incredible border.
Okay, so that's the idea there. Now, at the end of it, I haven't finished the sound and that sort of thing, but Donald Trump's head gets pooped on, and there should be the sound of a bird, maybe the sound of the bird guano dropping and that sort of thing. So I do have a separate video in which I talk about adding sound into a Flash animation. Now, I've done much of the preparatory work for this already, and in fact, what I've got here is a few of my projects open at the same time. This is so that when I go to use the library, and I use the drop-down option here in the library, I can access the libraries from my other projects. So all the work that I've already done leading up to my demo, I'm just going to reuse that. So let me go over to my Gilliam-inspired cartoon tutorial, and what I want to have is a version of Donald Trump's head, or whoever it happens to be, flying around, but while it flies around, I want it to have a jaw that moves up and down, just randomly for now, and eyes that are kind of bugged out and are animated on their own. So in order to get started, first what I had to do, and I'm not going to do this now because it takes too much time to do both stages in one video, but I would go to Photoshop, bring in a picture of Donald Trump, and cut the head off of the body and cut the jaw off of the head and save those images as PNG files, not JPEGs. Those PNG files can be imported into the library by going to File, Import to Library, and then using your browser you would find wherever you've saved those PNG files on your computer and bring them in. Once they're in your library, then you can start to animate them. But the thing is, I don't want to build my animation here in scene 1. Instead, I also want to do my animation in the library. So I'm going to go to Insert, New Symbol, and call it Trumpy Head or something like that. And it's going to be a movie clip. And now this is going to take me to a new stage, just a big workspace. And I've got, here's the name of my file. Now, what I need to do is get the library assets from my initial demo and bring them into this. So I go to my library here, and I've got Trump jaw and Trump no jaw. So let's start with this layer here. I'm going to take Trump no jaw. So this is a picture that I cut out in Photoshop. And I'm going to make his animation last, like, for the purpose of this demo, I just want to have his jaw move up and down a couple times. So I'm going to go to frame 10 and insert a frame. I'm going to set my frame rate here for 12 frames per second. And that has mostly to do with the fact that CS3, which is what I'm using to teach my students, yes, I know it's old, but it does work, it defaults to 12 frames per second, and that's just the frame rate I have my students work at. So I've got the head on layer 1. You make sure you name layers. You like it, you name it, you lock it, you save it. Remember to do that. You don't ever want to see the pinwheel of doom. Okay, so I'm going to create another layer here for jaw. And onto the jaw layer, I'm going to take the Trump jaw. And I can try to shift it in position, but actually if I use the cursor keys, it's a lot easier to do that. There we go. And now I lock the jaw layer. And what I need is the background of his mouth, so that when he's flying around and he opens his jaw, we're not looking through his head to the sky beyond. So in this case, I'm going to use a brush with black half decent brush size. I'm just going to fill in this. It's my mouse. I'm not using a mouse pad. I'm using a piece of paper. So there we go. Okay, that's good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect because that's going to go underneath the jaw like that. Okay. Actually, it's going to go right under the head. So now, that's locked, that's locked, that's locked. So the jaw, all I need to do now is, create a few various positions of the jaw. So to do this really quickly, I'm going to go to frame 10, insert a keyframe, go between these frames, and in the case of CS4, I'm going to put in a classic tween, and then just at a couple points between these keyframes, move the jaw into different positions. So here, and then here closed, and then here I'm going to open it quite a bit, maybe not quite that much, and then it's closed again. So there we go. That is the jaw moving up and down. Now another animation that I did on Donald Trump was I had him with sort of googly eyes. So I'm going to put whites on the eyes here, using my brush tool again, except this time using white. I am going to paint over his eyes, brush tool, brush tool. There we go. Doesn't have to be perfect at this point. Plus it kind of smooths out my brush strokes. There we go. There's the whites. Lock that layer. Now the pupils. And I use the same brush tool, but this time use black. And I put a dot there and a dot there. And I'm going to select those two pupils and modify to group, which is Command G. You like it, you name it, you lock it, you save it. Okay, now what I want to do is animate these pupils around the face a little bit. So I'll do the same thing that I did with the jaw. I'm going to go to this frame. I probably should have used more frames, but for the purpose of the demo, let's just do this quickly here. I put a keyframe in, put the, in this case, classic tween, and then same sort of thing. At this point, I can take these eyes and unlock the layer. Move them over here. I'm going to use my cursor buttons a little bit, give me a bit better control. And then here, I'm going to move them up. And then here they're going to go back to where they were. So for now, the eyes just do that. Once I've done this, Trump head, he's now built as an asset in the library with these two animations. If I go to scene 1 and bring that version of Trump, he's in my other library, of course, my Gilliam inspired cartoon. Trump head comes onto the stage, and he's a bit big for now if I want to have him fly around. So I'm going to shrink him down like this. And of course, in my picture I had or in my scene example, I had a picture of the White House, or the Oval Office in the background. So I can talk a little bit about what I did with that in a minute, but let's just have him, quickly animate across the stage. So I put a keyframe, I drag him across the stage, I put in this case, a classic tween, control, test scene, and Donald Trump flies across, and not a great frame rate, but anyway, he's got his blinking eyes and his moving mouth. Now, another thing that I did with that animation is I had the stage, or the scene that he's flying around in, he went behind the table. So I'm going to put office, and let's make sure I'm naming things and locking things. Name it, lock it, save it. So the office, somewhere in here, I have the Oval Office. There it is. So you can do this a couple ways. I've got, it's a fairly big picture, and if I zoom out, I'll see that it's actually quite a bit bigger than the stage if I turn this layer into an outline. Right? So I'm going to shrink this down to something a little bit more like that. I can afford to stretch it just a little bit. Okay, so there we have that. Let's just make sure that tweaking it a little bit. Now, actually, there we go. So my office is there. I like it. I lock it, save it. And the new layer is going to be the desk. So I cut these pictures apart in Photoshop as well, just like I did with the face and the jaw. Now, because I've already changed the size and proportions of the office, it might be a little tricky to get this to fit here. I probably should have done both of those at the same time, but really, for the purpose of the cartoon, it honestly doesn't really matter that much. As long as it sort of lines up, I can shrink it this way a little bit and then drop it down. That's convincing enough. It's got a little bit of a gap, so I shift it over once with the cursor button. So now my Trump head, as it flies around, of course it's way back there, so I'm going to put it above the office layer, but behind the desk layer, I think. So I'm going to go here and unlock his layer, lock that layer, and drop him down like this. So he's going to disappear. He's going to fly in, kind of disappear behind the desk. So I should maybe have him fly over here first. Then he drops behind the desk, and then he flies off. Okay, so now if we test movie. So the advantage of that is now that I have a part of the backdrop that he goes behind, it now doesn't look like he's just, a cutout flying in front of things, but he actually looks like he's integrated within the objects here. You can cut these objects apart in Flash, but the lassos and other tools in Flash, at least this version of Flash, are not particularly complex, and sometimes it's easier. Pick the right medium for whatever it is you're trying to do, cut things apart in Photoshop, and bring them in here. If I take you back to this floating head project, I had a few scenes here, one of which is here it is, the White House. So I have him flying behind the columns like that. So each of these columns was cut out. In this case, I did use the lasso within Flash because all I needed to do is basically cut rectangles. Those were pretty easy to cut out of Flash. But in order to do that, you have to activate an object. So let me show you how to do that. Let's just go here. It's already activated. When you bring a photo in, it won't go speckled like this. It's going to be essentially seen as an object already modified to group. So click on the photograph and go to Modify, Break Apart. And that should turn your object, your picture, into a background so that I could now take a lasso and take my lasso. Here we go. And if I wanted to delete that piece, I could. Of course, I don't want to do that. All right, so that's basically how you create a fairly simple, straightforward, Terry Gilliam-inspired animation, starting with Photoshop. But by this stage of this type of assignment with my students, they would already know how to cut things apart in Photoshop, and then bring those objects into Flash. When it comes to manipulating sound, that's something that I cover in another tutorial, so you can look for that somewhere else on Teach Me School Stuff. Thanks for watching. Bye.